The hospital corridor seemed quieter than usual on those last few nights, and each nurse who left my father's room repeated the same thing. He called out a name no one knew again. Elena! Elena! He murmured, as if begging for someone to appear. The whole family wondered who this mysterious woman was, who had never been mentioned in any conversation. No photo album, no record kept over decades. My father's expression, even weak, carried a mixture of guilt and need, as if the name were a key to something that had accompanied him throughout his life. And the more he repeated it, the more weight that word gained within me, to the point where I realized that it wasn't delirium. It was a secret he refused to take completely to the grave. After the wake, while the house still smelled of candles and wilted flowers, I began to go through his belongings with the feeling that Elena would be hidden somewhere there. That's when I found an old box, stored behind the bedroom closet, with a rusty padlock and a diary wrapped in a cloth. The first pages were almost erased, but I managed to decipher the old handwriting with care. In my young father's words, there was a story that no one imagined. He spoke of a girl he fell in love with before marriage, a forbidden love that he described with details he never used when talking about my mother. In the diary, her name appeared for the first time, Elena. Each line revealed a piece of a parallel life that he buried, but which continued to pulsate in his memory, so strongly that even on the verge of death he could no longer hide it. As I read, the atmosphere inside the room changed, and the feeling that something serious had been silenced became even more evident. The diary told about the day Elena said she was pregnant with his child and about the despair that this caused, because my father was engaged to my mother at the time. He wrote about the fear, the family pressure, the impossibility of acknowledging the relationship, and the promise to help discreetly. But then, suddenly, the text became heavier. The baby was born weak. She didn't survive. The child's name had never been revealed to anyone. And when my father described holding that tiny girl for just a few minutes, I understood why the name haunted him until the end of his life. Elena wasn't just a woman from the past. It was also the name of the daughter he lost, the daughter no one knew existed. At the end of the diary, there was a final paragraph, almost destroyed by time, written as a confession. If one day my son finds this, I want him to know that I never forgot, that I was wrong, and that I tried to move on with my life, but her name never left my heart. I closed the diary and felt something heavy taking over my chest, not like anger, but like an understanding of the pain he carried alone. The next day, I returned to the cemetery. The cold wind swept through the place as I knelt before his gravestone. And there, with the diary in my hand, I did something he never had the courage to do. I asked the clerk to engrave a name next to his, the name he called until his last breath. Elena, not to expose the past, but so that the story he hid for 50 years could finally rest with him. And as I watched the letters being fixed to the stone, I felt that, for the first time, my father was no longer whispering. He was at peace. After I put the name Elena on my father's tombstone, I thought that chapter was finally closed. But that same night, while putting the diary back in its old box, I realized I had dropped a sheet of paper stuck between the last pages. It was thin, almost transparent, folded so many times it seemed to have been hidden on purpose. When I opened it, I realized it wasn't my father's handwriting. It was a woman's. The text began with a short sentence that made my whole body freeze. If you are reading this, then he never found out the truth. From there, the handwriting became shaky, as if it had been written in a hurry. It said that the baby, little Elena, had not died in the hospital as my father believed. And before I could process it, the last lines revealed something even more disturbing. Someone took her that night, and I never managed to find her again. I spent hours staring at that note, trying to understand if it was a mother's despair or an even bigger secret than I had imagined. The entire diary took on a different meaning. Every sentence from my father, every regret, every whisper of the name Elena before he died. He wasn't calling out just out of guilt or longing. He was calling because he believed his daughter was buried. But perhaps she wasn't. The next morning, I returned to the hospital where everything supposedly happened 50 years ago. The building wasn't the same anymore, but a retired nurse still volunteered. When I asked about hidden births and erased records, she looked away, took a deep breath, and said something that unsettled me. Your father wasn't the only one. That year, many children disappeared from that same nursery. That ignited a flame I didn't know existed within me. I went home determined to find some document, some name, any clue. I rummaged through the entire box, the diary, the old clothes, until I found a small envelope tucked into the false bottom. Inside, there was only one photo. A woman holding a baby, Elena, I was sure. But in the background, almost out of frame, was a man in a lab coat, looking directly at the camera with an expression I couldn't decipher. Behind the photo, handwritten, was only one word: look for. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The handwriting was the same woman's as on the note, and below it, an address. But it wasn't from here. It was from a city almost 1,000 kilometers away, a place where no one in the family had ever lived. Why did she send me this? Why did my father hide it for so long? I put the photo in my pocket and stood in front of the door, trying to decide if this was just the end of a painful story or the beginning of something much bigger. The feeling, however, was clear. Someone was still alive, someone who knew the truth about Elena. And before I went to sleep, I received a message from an unknown number. It had no name, no greeting, nothing but a phrase that made my heart race. Stop looking. You have no idea what you're going to find. It was at that moment that I realized my father's story didn't end at the tombstone. It was only just beginning.